Hello, my name is Gemma and I'm an alcoholic. Hi, I'm so happy to be here. I want to say hello to everyone in this room and everyone in the overflow room. I hope the tech is going well and that I'm not glitching. They are working really hard to bring that over to you. And I just want to say, let's just do a quick thank you to all the tech people who just pulled that out. Hopefully that's going well. And also, I just want to thank the committee for an incredible weekend. So thank you so much to all of you for all of it takes so much work to go into every single detail of this weekend, and you've just done an incredible job. And my sobriety date is July 5th. 1996, like our speaker last night, July 5th, different year, and someone I heard today. It's a big day, July 5th. I was sitting here tonight, and I looked over at this beautiful cake, and I don't know if everyone can see, it's like a wedding cake. It's so beautiful, but we had our dessert on our table, and I thought, oh no, what if it's a tradition here to have the speaker eat some of the cake? Because I don't eat sugar, and then I'm going to have to tell them, like, on the stage that I can't eat the cake, and who made the cake, and I feel bad for the person who made, I don't want to offend them, and I never can eat the thing, and I've had allergies my whole life, and as a kid I had to bring tofutti to parties and trail mix, and I'm always on the outside, and I'm different, and then I just watch someone pick up the cake with one hand, because it's fake, and that's why I'm here. I have a trouble with reality. I have a trouble recognizing it. I have trouble staying in it. I have gone through so many things in my life that didn't happen. And it's been hard. It's been hard. So I'm just going to begin at the beginning and tell you that I'll give you the details. I just turned 48 last week, and I'm 28 years sober, and I got sober when I was 19 years old. I was born into a very loving home with a sober dad and an Al-Anon mom. I went to my first meeting when I was 5. Like our speaker said last night, I could have used it, but I was there to, for my dad. And, but I went to my first meeting for me. My dad brought me to my first meeting in early June of 1996. And I remember a woman came up to me and she said, "You never have to drink again." And I thought, does she think that's good news? Now, you may come here where that is good news, but for me, it wasn't. For me, alcohol was the thing that made me feel a part of. And I didn't know who or what I was going to do, what I was going to be without it. And I have been born with, I think, just these really scary stories and these really big feelings. And the scary stories made the feelings bigger, and the feelings made the stories scarier. And that has been the truth forever, even though I was loved and wanted. And I had an experience, I guess 10 years ago now, with my son. He was 5 years old, and he was sitting in the back seat of my car. And he said, "Mom, can you tell me 2 animals that are the same but different?" It's like, okay, squirrels and ferrets. And I didn't know what game we were playing, but I was trying to think of my next pair because I wanted to win, whatever this game was that we were playing. And then I heard him say, "Mom, have you ever felt like everyone in the world is a squirrel but you're a ferret? Now, I don't know what that question meant to him, what it means now. He's 15 years old. But I can tell you that the answer is yes. I can tell you that that is exactly how I always felt, that I was on the outside, that I was separate, that I was different, that I was broken, and that there was nothing, no evidence, nothing that had happened to explain or to make it make sense that I would feel that way. I spoke at a meeting a few years ago, and someone waited in line to say, "Why didn't you tell him horse and zebra?" I wasn't thinking. I'm so sorry. I didn't know I'd be telling the story for 10 years at the time. But I do know that it took my 5-year-old to explain exactly how I felt when I was 5. And sometimes when I'm staring at a wedding cake today, I can feel on the outside in a room of 750 people. And alcohol didn't make me feel like a squirrel. It made me not care that I was a ferret. Because there was something that happened when I drank, where it was like, I could feel on the outside all the time, but when I drank, it was like, I'm a ferret! There goes my top! I didn't have inhibitions, and I wasn't obsessed with what you were thinking of me. I had confidence, and it was this amazing thing that it made me feel thinner and prettier and more together and more, as it was doing absolutely the opposite, as I was falling to the ground and feeling like I had arrived. Alcohol for me is the thing that takes all of my opportunities and all of my gifts, all of my blessings, and turns them into annoyances because they get in the way of the way that I want to drink. And anytime I've had a problem with anything, it's because my gifts get in the way of doing the thing that I want to do. And that was true with my drinking. I got sober at 19. I don't have a crazy drunk-a-log for you. I'm so sorry. Had I known, I was trying so hard not to get here. So I was really careful. I'd been in meetings my whole life already. And I thought that this was lovely for you. And, but I was really committed to not getting here young. Whoops. I can just say that once I started drinking, I couldn't stop. I drank never for the taste. My first drink was, a bottle from a friend's house where we had put, I think, gin, vodka, Kahlua, it was just everything in a jar. And then we chugged it, and then we got really, really sick. And I called my sober dad to tell him. I just wanted to be up on board, that I was drunk. I drank knowing that I was going to throw up, and so that was sort of how I went for things that were sweeter, but that's not how normal drinkers drink, where you're like, what will this taste like coming up? I'm going to base my drinks based on that. So I went to a school. I had to decide what school to go to, and I was so nervous. And I decided to go to a school based on fear. I made a fear-based decision. I went into my room and I really wanted to go to Northwestern, but I had this idea that if I applied there that I wouldn't get in and that I'd have to wait to find out and then I wouldn't, people would ask me, oh, did you get into school? And I'd be like, no, I didn't. And I just had this scary story that I told myself. So instead, I went and I found a card to a school that I'd never heard of. It was called Puget Sound, and it had a little card that said, how does Puget sound? And I thought, they're funny, I'll go there. And it was a good experience, but the thing is that my alcoholic thinking leads to alcoholic solutions. My alcoholic thinking is I can come up with a problem that hasn't happened, then implement a solution that I'm not going to run by anyone, and then implement that solution and run with it, and that's how I ran my life. I could have, I feel like I could have gotten here a few years sooner, and that would have helped a lot. But my last night of drinking led me to to having one drink. I was going out for one drink. And then once I had that first drink, I said, well, we were in New York City. I was like, let's have one drink in every bar on this street, which was St. Mark's Place, which is a long street. And my friend who I was with said, I think you might have a drinking problem. And I said, oh, I do. I have alcoholism. It runs in my family. My dad's been sober for 15 years. I'm so happy for him. I'm going to get sober when I'm 35. And that was the plan. I had alcohol poisoning that night, which I had all the time. And, it's so funny. I remember my parents showing me black and white movies, when I was a kid. And I remember seeing All About Eve. And I remember I would see how fabulous they were drunk. And I was like, that's what I want to be when I grow up, And I remember at 5 or 6 years old being in my bedroom, and I would put on just a slip, and I'd have a glass of water with olives, and I would line up my dolls and just sort of hurl insults at them, and stumble around my room. So getting sober at 19 was not the dream. It was not the plan. It was not what I wanted to do. But my sober dad got called into the city for this job interview. And when he got there, they said, we don't know why you were called. You're not qualified for this job at all. And my dad did not like a trip into the city for no reason. So he called me up and he said, do you want to have lunch? And I had been throwing up for 14 hours. And I don't know if you remember that sort of special humility that comes from throwing up for 14 hours, And I had toilet marks on my forehead and on my chin. I had linoleum marks on my face from being on the floor. And I remember opening the door and just saying, hi, Daddy. Vomit on my shirt. Nothing to see here, my parents said to me, here's the deal. And it was actually not my dad. It was my Al-Anon mom who said, she tried love, and when that didn't work, she said, here's the deal. We're sending you to school. It's very expensive, and we think, you're going to die. So it's not a good investment. And if you want to go to school, you have to get sober. When I got here, I didn't get here because I was willing. I didn't get sober because I wanted to. I got here on a very bizarre tuition program. And I did everything wrong. I would show up and more so than the drinking was how much I hated myself. I hated myself. I hated being in my skin. I hated the way I looked. I hated the sound of my voice. I hated the things I chose to say. I was so consumed with self-loathing. And when I first came to my first meeting and this person told me, you never have to drink again, that didn't feel like good news. It really, really didn't. And I remember the topic was balance in the meeting, and I raised my hand and I shared about, well, I was drinking last night and I lost my balance, and I was very literal with the topic, and I was early to go, but everyone loved me and just listened to me. And, I had 11 phone numbers by the end of that meeting, and they surrounded me with love. And, I got sober. I would go to one meeting a week, like it was therapy or something. And I remember walking down the street in like a tight pants and a tight shirt that said girl, and I had these shoes that were like platforms. It was the 90s, and and I just stumbled. It would take me so long to get to that meeting because I was in such uncomfortable shoes, and and then people would say something to me, and I remember just eating a bagel and being like, I just was I was out of my mind, and walked into a meeting and someone's like, are you new? I was like, how do you know? I couldn't believe that they knew. And I thought I was hiding it so well. And basically it was just I had to change everything, but not in one day, And there's this thing that we say here all the time, we're going to love you until you love yourself. And sometimes I think that sounds kind of funny, because it's then when you love yourself, do we stop? No, we don't. We never stop. We always are going to love you. But there's this thing that I couldn't feel it. I just couldn't feel it. For me, what happened, my story is, I started to show up here, and I started to make some friends. And I had this one dear friend, and she, her name was Sandy. We're still friends to this day. And I loved her so much. And when I was new, I would do this thing where I would buy all these groceries, and then they would, rot. And then I would throw them all away, and I would feel bad that I'd wasted all this food. And it still happens, I go to the farmer's market and I'm like, I'm going to buy eggplant. I don't know how to cook, but there's something about a farmer's market that makes you feel like a chef. I don't know. It happens for me. And so this one time I had bought this meat, and it was gray. It was going bad. And I was like, this is what I deserve. This is what I get. I do this all the time. I buy this stuff and I don't cook it, and I deserve this. So I went to open it, and it didn't smell terrible, but it didn't smell great. And then I go to cook the meat, and I'm like, oh, okay, and I'm checking my calendar to see if I have time for food poisoning. And I did. I didn't have much going on. So I started to eat this meat, and I thought, would I serve this to Sandy? And then I thought, I would never serve this to her. And then I thought, if I wouldn't serve it to her, then maybe I shouldn't serve it to myself. For me, what happened is I learned how to love you. And that's how I learned how to love myself. And I'll take it. Thanks. I learned how to show up here. I learned that when you say you're going to go somewhere and you're going to show up for someone, that you have to do it because they want you to show up. I made plans to go to Minnesota with someone and then didn't do it, and she was upset. And we lived in New York, so, there was advance notice, and I just didn't follow through. But I thought, but it's just me. It's just me, why would you care? And there were so many people that I didn't show up for because I was so uncomfortable in my own skin. And for me, the most abusive relationship that I had been in my adult life was with myself. There was no one that I would talk to like I talked to myself. And so when I first got sober, there was this meeting that had just started, and it was called Never Had a Legal Drink. And that meeting saved my life. It had been going for 6 months by the time I found it. And I had people that expected me to be there on certain nights, and that I showed up for. And then we would go to the diner, and we would, spend so much time dividing up a check at the end of the night. And but that was how I learned to, that I had value to other people, to be of service. And, when I had I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. So I started to go to regular meetings, and there was this one time that I really wanted to drink, and I called my sponsor, and I said, I really want to drink. And she said, where are you? And I said, I'm at the International AA Convention. And she said, well, what are you going to have? And I said, I don't know. And she said, well, where are you going to get it? And I said, I don't know. And she said, oh, I don't think you want to drink. I think you want to feel better. And that's all I've ever wanted. And in my mind, in my alcoholic thinking, I equate that, even though it never made me feel better. It never was the answer. It never was the thing. But in my mind, that quick fix seems like, oh, that's all I need, right? And I went to a meeting at another point when I really wanted to drink, and there was a guy there. He said, when I had 2.5 years of sobriety, I did something different and everything changed. And he didn't go into any detail about what that might be. So I had to stay to the end of the meeting. And I chased after him, and I remember it was a really rainy night. It was so rainy, and there was rain, and I was crying, and there was mucus, and I was just a mess. And at the same time, I was like sucking in. It's like, maybe he's the one. And I said, what did you do? And he said, I stopped making it all about me. And I was someone who, up until that point, I would have a roommate who would say, are you going to a meeting tonight? And I'd say, no, I'm in a good place. I had a good day, I don't need one. And after that day, I realized that that's not how it works here. That on the days that I happen to be having a good day, that's the day that I have to show up for the person who isn't. Because I have been the person who wasn't for so long, And I started to see that all these shadowy figures that I'd been seeing around were other people. And that when they asked me how I was, that was not necessarily an invitation to speak for 25 minutes. That I could ask them how they were. And I remember being at a meeting, and a woman, I don't remember how much time I had, but she walked, I said hi, and she didn't say hi back. Oh God, she hates me, right? Like that would be the answer, right? But then I went upstairs and I said hello to her, and it was her first meeting. And I became her sponsor. she just celebrated 20 years. I saw it on Facebook, I'm not her sponsor anymore, but she's still sober, that's the point. But I can't get out of myself by going deeper into myself. I have to get out of myself by helping other people, by talking to other people, by getting into the reality of other people, by caring for you. And when I have alcoholism. I have a disease that wants me dead but will settle for me miserable. I have a disease that says, oh, you just need one more thing and then you'll be happy. You're right around the corner from happy. You just need one more thing. And then I get that thing and it's like, but then I also need that thing. And then I get that thing and it's like, well, but that, oh, and that, and that. And I can keep bringing things to the altar of my alcoholism, but my alcoholism never says, well done. I have nothing to say. My alcoholism says, you don't deserve it. You're going to lose it. Nobody likes you. You can't even eat cake. My alcoholism's going to tell me whatever my alcoholism's going to tell me, right? And so being on the outside, right, this feeling of being separate. And I remember that feeling, like when I went into my first meeting, I was like, here's where all the ferrets are, Here's where all the ferrets are. And I tried really hard to convince you, I'm a squirrel, I'm a squirrel. But I belong here not in spite of the things that I feel like are broken in me or my trouble or the painful things in my past. I belong here because of those things. That I have my story, and that when I go through something painful, that the best thing I'm going to be able to do with the pain that I'm going through is use that experience to help someone else. So I had this idea that I just had this list, of things that I needed. And I moved to California, and I just wanted to get the next thing, right? And that's not in the book. I'm just telling you my experience. And for a long time, it was like a relationship. I just need to be in a relationship. Now, for me, I don't know if anyone has a cat. But I had a cat, and I remember seeing this cat rub up against a door, and the cat was having this whole experience, right? Like this whole incredible experience. The door was not participating, right? The door is just being a door, but the cat is having this incredible that, from an emotional standpoint, was all my relationships. The other people didn't have to participate. I had it all going on up here. And I remember I would say to my sponsor, I'm dating someone. And she'd be like, do they know? Not always. I ended up getting married. And I had, then we just need to get a house. We just need to get a house, and then I'll be okay, once we get the house. And then I got the house, and there was an extra room there. And I was like, well, we have to have a baby. Got to put a baby in that room, and we did. We had a baby, and I remember being with that baby, and he was so perfect. I remember just looking at him and thinking, all I need is a career, When my kid wasn't enough, I knew. It's like, oh, it's never going to be enough. I'm never going to be enough for my alcoholism, ever. And, none of that stuff fixed me. And a lot of it felt like, oh, and then I did get a career. And I stayed I went to work and my husband stayed home. And then that was something that made me feel different, that I didn't know, like all the other moms at school knew what was going on. And, even the ones that were working, and I somehow didn't. And, here I am, I'm different. I'm on the outside. I'm not doing it right. I have maybe the life I want to be living, but I'm not living it the way that I should. I'm not enough. It all comes down to that for me, is that I'm just not enough, right? That's what the lie is. That's what my head tells me. And, I'll tell the story about that house that we lived in. I'm from New York City, and so in the backyard of this house, there was a lime tree. And I was so excited about it because I pretty much felt like a farmer. That we were going to have like a harvest in our backyard. And I remember going out, people would say, what can we bring to the barbecue? And I'm like, don't bring limes. We have a tree. And I went out and I went to pluck our first lime, hard as a rock. And I was like, okay, that's fine. It's not quite ready yet. And so the next week, hard as a rock. And pretty soon, like the lime tree just sort of became like indicative of like things don't work out for me. And it became the symbol of that. And I started to resent the lime tree. And it fell off the tour. And then I just started to resent citrus in general, And summer was over and good riddance. And one day I came home and my husband at the time was in the living room and he was eating an orange, and I was like, where did you get that? And he said, from the lime tree. And we go outside, and he's standing there with like a sticky smile, and there's this huge, beautiful orange tree. And for me, like, that is, for me, what it feels like to have alcoholism sometimes, because I am so convinced that something is what I think it is. And then I get a resentment for it not behaving the way I think it should be behaving. This is supposed to be my job. This is supposed to be my person. This is supposed to be the house we grow. This is what it's supposed to be, and it's not acting like it. And so I get angry. I get resentful. I get hurt. I take it personally, when really my experience is that God has a plan, and that when I'm patient, more is revealed, and I'm almost always wrong. If something isn't behaving the way I think it's supposed to, maybe it isn't the thing I think it is. And I get to, do an inventory where I get to discover all that stuff. Now, I had this fear before we had the kid that if we had a baby, that my mother-in-law would move to town. And I had this whole fantasy about, like, we're going to have a baby, and then she's going to move here, and it happened. But what I didn't realize is what a gift it was going to be. And one of the reasons that it was a gift was she was an incredible person, but one day she said something about me that really hurt my feelings. Really hurt my feelings. And I brought it to, we have a choice when we get a resentment. We can either feed that resentment, we were talking about this, or we can starve it. And so all you have to say to certain people is, my mother-in-law, and everyone's like, oh, yeah, And I had this, it was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then I heard this woman talking about pen to paper, and I asked her to be my sponsor. And she took me through the inventory process, and she helped me to get to, as it was talked about earlier, to forget about harm done to me, but what is my part? What is the thing? What is my mistake? What am I doing in this situation. I heard such a wonderful talk about the 8th and 9th step today. If you missed it, get the recording. It was so great. But like, what am I doing? What did I do? And the truth is that in this thing that she said, there was a nugget of truth. I didn't want there to be, but there was. And when I started with my sponsor and my higher power to work on that nugget of truth, I got a different result, right? I had a different experience. And I was so plagued with that resentment of her for so long. It came in between every interaction we had. It was there, though we didn't talk about it, and she might not have known about it, but it was in the room all the time until I did that work. And then it wasn't. And then one day she had to get a procedure, and it was a routine procedure, but she did not wake up from it, and she passed very suddenly on Valentine's Day of 2016. And I remember being in her hospital room and knowing it was so stunning and so confusing, and I didn't see it coming, but I knew that we were clean and that I didn't owe her an amends. That we were clean, that I had, in the years since that resentment, I had behaved differently. Because I used to take everything she did personally. I'm not one of those people that I'm not like a cooker and a cleaner type of person, you know? And she was the type of person where I'd go to throw out a paper towel roll, and she'd be like, no, I'll make a maraca. And I used to take that personally, that I wasn't, you know, that meant something, that I wasn't enough, you know? And I had this incredible freedom that came from that. And also, you know, my son is 15 now, and I see her in him in so many different ways. And when I was worried about her moving here, you know, I didn't take that into consideration, you know? There's this thing that someone said at a meeting, this woman, Anne, I think she was from Florida, and she talked about a gift in a garbage bag. And there's so many things in my life that I've decided are bad news, you know? Like, this is going to be bad news. And what I've found in all of those things is that there has been some gift, something good that has come out of it, you know? For me, it's all about my perspective. I was one of I happened to be the first speaker online at the Pacific Group when it went online, and there were 765 people on the Zoom, on the online meeting. And they announced my name, and I watched that number drop to 764. Just one, you know, just by one person. But I was like, who is it? Who left? Why'd they go? Will I ever know? Who was it? And I put so much focus on that one person, you know? And then it turned out it was my sponsor's boyfriend, and it wasn't even personal, but it doesn't matter. The point is where am I putting my focus? Because I will put my focus on the one and not the 764, you know? And I have this, you know, I have a house, and it has a really nice view. And then this tree started to grow up and block a little bit of the view. And sometimes when I look out the window, the tree is all I see, even though it's just this much. And I said this to a friend, and she was like, oh, you know what? The tree lives there. It isn't blocking your view. It's part of your view. So I have a choice every day what I'm going to focus on. And I can make a case, right? There's evidence everywhere. There's evidence that there's, you know, that I'm surrounded by love, and then there's other evidence of, you know, and I get to choose what kind of case do I want to make today. You know, where do I want to put the focus? Because of going through the steps, I find that like when I have a situation that like I'm in and I'm like, I would love this job except for this person, or I would love this house except for that neighbor, I feel like that person, place, or thing is the thing that's blocking me from what I want, from but because I'm sober and because my being in pain is the thing that gets me to do the work, it is usually that person, place, or thing that is the path to my freedom, because it is the thing that gets me to put pen to paper, to do that work. When I had, 20-something years, I was speaking a lot, and I was, I think I got into a place where I got confused between talking about the steps and doing the steps. There's a thing, when I moved to LA, I thought, I just want a house with a white picket fence. Like if I had a white picket fence, everything would be fine. And then I got one. I was like, these don't work. And time, for me, time can be like that. I have 28 years of sobriety. You might not then go, are you okay? How are you? So for me, I got into a place where I was starting to think about drinking like a little tiny bit more than I was, and then the thought would linger for a tiny bit longer, and I was having some trouble at home, and I didn't want to talk about it, and I certainly didn't want to share about it from the podium, and I didn't want to, I was speaking and I wasn't sharing. I wasn't telling you where I was anymore. And what happened for me is that the wheels fell off the bus. When I had about 22 years of sobriety, and the things that I was doing for my recovery weren't enough, and I completely fell apart. And I was really struggling in my marriage, and I didn't even totally know that I was. There's a guy, Phil, who says, I have a disease of alcoholism and it's going to get treated. It's going to get treated with alcohol, or it's going to get treated with God in the steps, or it's going to find another way. And I can find lots of ways in sobriety to treat that. And I don't want to talk about it. And I was suffering in silence in sobriety with long-term sobriety. And there's a difference between pain and suffering. I think pain is okay. Pain is the indicator that something's wrong. But I was suffering. I was suffering in silence. And what happened for me is that I got a new sponsor. This was about 5 years ago. And I went through the steps as written in the big book. And I was crying all the time. I remember coming home and my husband pointed out, like, I had this shirt on, and he was like, "What's on your shirt?" I was like, "Oh, those are tears." And I realized, I was like, I should develop a product like tear bibs for adults. And I'm not crafty, but if I was, I would make one on Etsy, and I started to think, like, what would it be made of, and how should it be fastened? It should be easy, because you're sad, and I was crying all the time, but I was also going through the steps at the same time, and I was telling the truth. And I had this really big fear that I didn't even know what it was, but it was this really big fear about my marriage. And there was a lot of really inspirational, beautiful shares yesterday about how Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon saves marriages. And I absolutely know that to be true. It isn't my story. My story is that I started going through the steps, and I heard this guy say that his prayer was, "God, help me use the steps and the fellowship to find my way, not get my way." His name's John N. That's not mine. And when he said that, I thought, uh-oh. oh no. I went through the steps again, and I remember I hadn't done them in a long time on a consistent basis. And I remember I did steps 1, 2, and 3, and it came time to do an inventory, and I for whatever reason, I bought this really big notebook, and I thought, all these pages are going to go to waste. It's 200 pages. I filled every page of that notebook. And all of that resentment that I was putting, all of that stuff, that isn't just something that I thought of. That was what I was carrying with me all the time. It was coming into every interaction I had with people. And, and I got to go to my sponsor and tell her the truth about what I was going through. And this is the beautiful thing, is that, and I know this from being a sponsor, is that someone I love can come sit in my living room and they can tell me the worst things they have ever done, said, thought, or felt. And when they leave my living room, I love them more. Where else is that possible? Except Alcoholics Anonymous. I did my 6th and 7th step. I did my 8th and 9th step, which we talk about like when we were amazed before we were halfway through. I was so amazed before I was halfway through that I stopped. But you got to keep going, And that year that I went through the steps again, it was incredibly painful, but it wasn't suffering. I wasn't suffering. It was a healing pain. When I got through the steps and got through the other side, when I remember talking to a friend of mine, and he said, well, here's the deal, when you're having a hard time and you have to just get in the middle of AA, you get right in the middle, and you're of service, and you start doing commitments, and everything gets better. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, I'm doing all of that, and I'm still struggling. And he was like, I need you to do that in your marriage. I was like, okay. So I took him really literally, and I got secret commitments in my marriage that I started to do. I started to do these commitments in my marriage. I took the coffee commitment. I took the greeter commitment, and I resigned from the secretary position and the treasurer. And what the greeter commitment meant was that when I walked in that door, I got off my phone, and that I said good morning, that I said good night, and that I was present, and that I made coffee for him in the morning. And not that I took any, but that I was very present and out of myself. Now, I understand that this would be more inspiring if we were still together. But what happened for me is that all of that worked. The resentment fell away, and we got to a place where we could have worked things out if I wasn't able to live authentically and be married to a man. And I realized that not by acting on it, but knowing that was my truth, and that it had been. And I left my marriage 3 years ago, and AA and Al-Anon may not have saved my marriage, but it absolutely saved my family. Because I didn't blow up my marriage. I did not blow up my family. I had to make a very painful decision, because the way that I was living was no longer fair for anyone. And in that, we used the principles of this program as we navigated a separation. My experience is that I have never had to go through anything alone. that there are people that have like showed me the way and that have told me, how to do things. And we are so close as co-parents today. And we have a son who is in school, and we're celebrating Thanksgiving together. And a week ago he texted me, and he's my ex-husband, and he said, "Don't worry." You never want a text that starts with "don't worry." "Don't worry, I'm in the hospital, but don't worry. I just have food stuck in my esophagus." And then I got another text. "My enzymes don't look good, but don't worry, don't come here, everything's fine." Then I got another text. "Okay, I had a heart attack, but it's okay. Don't worry." And then I'm going into surgery. I was like, I'm coming now, like coming to the hospital. And, as it turned out, he had 100% blockage in his widowmaker and 80% in another artery, and they were able to put in stents. And I was explaining, and he's going to be okay. He was in the hospital for a few days, and he's going to be fine. And I was explaining to my son what happened, and he had talked to him about it too, and he said, "Oh, I think it's just heart attack is a scary word. And but when you really live through it, it isn't. Just like divorce was such a scary word, but the way you did it, it wasn't." That's Alcoholics Anonymous. That's not me. You've showed me how to show up. You've showed me how to act better than I feel, and and not bring things to people that I shouldn't bring them to, And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful because it was such a close call, and I have really big feelings about little things and really tiny feelings about big things. This whole week, people have asked me, "How are you?" And I'm like, "I'm okay. It wasn't me. It didn't, And it wasn't until I heard the speakers last night that I was able to start to cry and to feel like that was really scary. I'm someone I don't know if it's alcoholism or what it is, that like I'm carrying these bricks in my backpack, and I want to be okay way before I am, like that I don't want to say that I'm having a hard time because other people may have it worse, or I just want to get to the part where I'm okay. But I love that I have a home group where I can share every bump in the road, where I can talk about it, where I can talk about loss. I lost not only my mother-in-law, but then a year later, my father. And for me, grief is weird, and it comes out sideways. And for me, grief never shows up with a little label on it that says, this is what it is, And I remember I had a friend who, she lost her dad and she hadn't cried yet. And I said, just remember, if you suddenly start, if you drop a bag of potato chips and you cry, let yourself cry. If you need to cry for half an hour, you cry about it, because it's not about the potato chips. And then call me. And then I got, she did. And she's like, I'm having a potato chip moment, and it doesn't happen in real time for me. And I'm someone who really cared what other people thought. It was so hard for me to be authentic, to be my real self. And it's the greatest gift I have. It's all I've got, is that I can just live my truth and show up for it, And I I got into a couple relationships. I didn't get into a relationship for a year, and then I got into a couple relationships, and let's just say the similar issues came up on the exit interview. We'll just put it that way. There were common threads. There were things that kept, happening. And then I spoke at a meeting, and the secretary said, there was someone at that meeting that asked if you were single, and she wanted to know if you were single. And I had just gone through a breakup. And I said, I am. And she texted me and asked me out, and I said, I would love to go out with you, but I've just come through a breakup, and I need to take a minute. I just need to take a beat to go back through the steps. And that's what I did. Because if I keep doing the same thing, I'm going to keep getting the same result. And I didn't know her, and I didn't know anything about her, but I thought, maybe she's the one. And I need to go out with her because she's going to leave, and I'm not going to have this opportunity, and what if I miss it? And I had this thought that I don't believe that that's how my higher power works. I don't believe that my higher power would introduce me to someone wonderful, but say, oh, but you took time to take care of yourself, so sorry. And I did take that time. And I thought it would be, a few weeks, but it was 7 months. And at the end of that 7 months, I was able to reach out, and, we've been together ever since, and she's here with me tonight. And as a result of doing the steps, I'm having different result. I'm in a relationship with someone who, A, knows we're in a relationship, just... progress. And all this, time, or I would say, oh, what is my ideal person? Who would they be? Who would they be? In this last time through my steps, my sponsor said, who is your ideal person for you to be in a relationship? How would it feel? How would you show up? Who would you be in that? And that's who I get to be, and that's never been the case before. So I don't think that it's always, I have these motives that are wrong, I think I'm trying. One time in the pandemic, a friend of mine and I, we were driving from a mountainous area, and we found this dog. And we tried really hard to rescue the dog. Turns out my friend's one of these people. She had dog food in her car. We had a leash, and we worked for half an hour. We almost got the dog in the car, and then I was like, this is a coyote. It was a coyote, and sometimes, even when I have the best intentions, I overstep. But I get an opportunity here to look at my behavior and to do something differently. I'm just going to be quiet for 1 second to just make sure there's nothing else that I want to say. I could have missed everything. I could have missed my whole life if I had gotten my way. If I had gotten the things that I thought I deserved, the things that I demanded, the things I thought I needed, I could have missed being sober and all of the people that I have in my life. I'm glad I'm wrong all the time. Showing up is a superpower. It's what I've learned how to do here. I don't know how things will work out. I don't know what'll happen. Life, I remembered in the last week, isn't a guarantee, and it's really tenuous. And all I get to do is show up. And I heard this great talk in the pandemic by Father Tom, and he talked about Sister Wendy, and someone said to her, "How do I know if I'm spiritual?" And she said, "Are you any easier to live with?" And so that's my prayer. That's my prayer every day, that I can just be a little bit easier to live with, that it can be easier to have me as a mom, as a sponsor, as a sponsee, as a boss, as an employee, as a girlfriend, as an ex-wife, as a daughter. God, please help me to just be a little bit easier to live with, a little bit more gentle, a little bit more gentle on myself, a little bit more gentle on you, to find the joy, to find the connection. And I'm going to close with this, because I didn't talk about meditation, but it is really important to me. So I just want to, when I was new to meditation, I didn't want to do it because I wasn't having this like big experience that everyone has, right? And so I was going to just time myself for 3 minutes, and I went into the other room, and I timed myself for 3 minutes, and I was about to set the timer, and my son walked in, and he was 4 years old at the time. And I was like, oh no, I'm not going to be able to, he's going to ruin my meditation. He's going to talk or do something. And he just sat down and he closed his eyes tight. And we just sat there in quiet for 30 seconds. And I was worrying that he was going to ruin the meditation. And then he just said, "I love you." And then at 2.5 minutes, he said, "I think the timer's broken." For me, that's what meditation is, right? It's just taking the time out of my busy day to like make a connection, to be with my higher power, and to just say, "I love you. Thank you for my life. Thank you for this opportunity to be sober, to share my story, to have this whole life that I didn't ask for. And thank you for this weekend, for this time, for learning your stories, for the way you've shared, for this incredible weekend that we get to take this message and we get to bring it home, and we get to bring it to our home groups, and we get to bring it to, out into the world." For me, I'm leaving here with things that I know I need to look at. I have, and I also have a new phrase, is God has till Friday. I learned that from Diane. But I also learned I want to go someplace, I don't know about once a week, but often go to a place where I don't want to end up. Thank you. That's not something that I was doing. And that's something I got to learn that I needed to do this weekend. So I hope that you take something away from this weekend and you bring it home. And thank you so much for an incredible weekend, for an incredible conference. And I love you.